The objective is to align yourself with God's will. God is telling you, very simple, man. I gave you all the cures just in the foods, and that's the natural foods in their natural state. Nothing genetically modified, nothing with all these chemicals on it. Welcome to the Health Quest Podcast, your guide to God's will for good health. Hello, my name is Dr. Sal, and I've been a practicing doctor and surgeon for well over 30 years. And my goal for each episode is that you'll be able to transform your mind to God's design for your good health, as well as affect the way that you eat and the way that you live. If you're new here, we release a new episode every week, and if you enjoy the content, would you please leave us a good review? It really helps our ratings and allows our show to reach more people, which in turn, we can help more people change their ways. I'd like to thank you for your support. And in today's episode, we're going to be basically taking a compilation of previous episodes and previous podcasts that talk about a variety of different subject matters that you'll be able to extract information that may be useful for you. You may not have to go back to the original podcast to listen, or you can go back to the original podcast to get more information. But just taking that little bit of an information, you can now implement it into your daily life habits and then get more of the information as the understanding behind it all. And with that, please enjoy today's episode of our compilation of previous podcasts. So our first question comes from Royal Oak, Michigan, from Susan. Dr. Sal, I understand that plastic is not a good thing, particularly to store foods. Can you give me some advice as to what to do after I have a meal that I need to store for the next day or so? Well, Susan, that's a very good question because we're using a lot of plastic today. And the thing with plastics is that they contain two chemicals, bisphenol A or BPA and phthalates, which, and I talked about this before, these are some of the toxins that leak into our food, and they could be metabolic disruptors or endocrine disruptors. Metabolic disruptors meaning they affect the way we metabolize foods or produce proteins that either are beneficial for us or they disrupt the hormone levels in our body. And certain things like phthalates can mimic the lipophilic hormones, which actually stimulate more fat production in our body. So plastics is one of the ways, and what's even worse than storing it in plastic is that we reheat foods in the microwave with plastics, and that's how these chemicals actually leak into our foods and we consume them. Now, of course, it's not going to kill us at the time when we eat it, but over time, this is what's contributing to a lot of these disorders that we're seeing in today's modern society. So we use a lot of plastic for, let's say, our beverages. Let's take those, for instance. Well, as a kid growing up, I remember all the soda pops came in bottles, whether it was 7-Up or ginger ale. And it's not like we were drinking this stuff all the time. We would have it with dinner. Of course, my mom would pour a little bit of wine in the 7-Up or ginger ale, kind of make it was actually the initial wine cooler. So those old Italian mothers were the original wine cooler makers. And of course, Ernest and Gallo started doing that and made millions off of that back in the 80s. But anyways, but a lot of the beverages came in glass bottles. Coca-Cola used to come in 12. Actually started off with 8-ounce bottles, and of course they went to 12-ounce. And now they've come into these 2 liters of plastics, even bottled water. Now, if you haven't noticed, you take the foreign water that comes in, like your San Pellegrino, your Perrier. San Pellegrino comes from Italy. Perrier comes from France. And they come in these hard plastic bottles that are colored. They're usually green. And when you see the kind of water that comes into that plastic bottle that cringes when you squeeze it, the softer that plastic is, the more of these phthalates and BPAs get into that water, especially when it's exposed to heat. Now, if you take like the old Tupperwares, okay, they were made out of harder plastic. That's actually a better plastic to store it in. But what I store my food in is in the Pyrex glass storage containers. And you can get those at Kroger's. And if you go out west, Kroger's merged with Albertsons. They're pretty much the same. They carry these Pyrex storage containers, and they're circular, they're square, they're large, they're small. Of course, they come with a plastic top that you can cover it, but the food is always sitting in glass. I've always preferred glass over plastic because even in recycling, and what I found out is that only 10% of the plastic ever gets recycled. And of course, they've got every reason not to recycle the plastic because they've got labels or they've got colors in them, and so they can't recycle them. And so we end up taking them to India, and it gets thrown out into the Indian Ocean, and then the fish eat this stuff. I mean, it's ridiculous. Glass is always recyclable. Always recyclable. Glass comes from sand. An easy and it's easily accessible resource to make a container that we could store food and beverages in. And of course, the hassle would come in that you would have to drop it off to get it recycled. And I wish they had more of that as far as putting them in bins that you could put glass in, that the recycling units from the cities can come by and actually take that to recycle it. So glass, I think, is the best. I know is the best way to store your foods. And like I said, Pyrex, and it's not that expensive either. I love it. I love it because they come in different sizes. When I make my vegetables on a Sunday, and I'll make enough for about 3-4 days, and I make my cabbage and my rapini and my Swiss chard. And of course, I make it, certain ways, which I'm going to come out with a cooking video on this stuff. But putting them in the glass Pyrex storages and putting them in your refrigerator is a good way to store your food. And when it comes to heating it, instead of using a microwave, you could always reheat it in you could either use a cast iron pan, or if you use a Teflon nonstick pan, use very low temperatures, because the chemicals that are in the Teflon that at high temperatures get released and also get in the food. So always cook your foods. It's the best thing to do is to cook your foods at low temperature. And it takes a little longer to cook, but it stores more heat, and it doesn't burn the food or chars it, because that creates these polycarbons, which can be carcinogenic too as well. So if you're at work, hey, even a toaster oven works fantastic, right? Put it in that little bin, throw it in a toaster oven, heat it up, and it's a good way to heat your foods without any of the detrimental effects of the microwave itself. So Pyrex, you can get them at your Kroger stores. I'm sure you can get them in some of the other grocery stores, like I said, Albertson out west, and I'm sure you could pick those up too at Macy's and some of these other department stores as well. Our next question hails from New Jersey. His name is Ron from New Jersey. What could be done to strengthen our brain power and avoid memory loss or Alzheimer's? Well, Ron, if you had listened to some of my podcasts, a lot of these disorders like dementia, brain fog is all due to this low chronic inflammation that's taking place in our body. We all have this leaky gut. Our body allows certain proteins to seep in through the intestinal system into the circulatory system, which then sparks an immune response, which leads to inflammation, which then, as like even with gliadin and lipopolysaccharides, these are detrimental, and they permeate through the blood-brain barrier and start to affect the neurons and the brain cells and alter the neurotransmitters, helps to build the plaques up, which causes Alzheimer's in the long run. So reducing inflammation is one of the key factors. Again, we go off, and your fish oil and your turmeric really helps out in that. The ways to build strength is to keep the mind constantly active, whether it's doing puzzles, reading. There was a great TED Talk it was called The 92-Year-Old Bodybuilder, and this 90-year-old man was saying how we all retire at 55 and 60 years of age when we're really at the best in our life. I mean, we've got some life experience, we've got some knowledge, we should really be starting our lives off at 60 years of age. And he kept himself physically active, reading, writing, taking classes. There's a friend of mine, he just got his master's in law, and there was an 82-year-old attorney who went back to law school to get his LLM is what it's called, and I guess that's your master's in law. So keeping yourself active, reading, just don't sit around watching TV all day. That's a mindless thing, and you'll start to get a lot of negative communications from television that just doesn't really do you any benefit long term, either physically by sitting around and watching hours of TV or intellectually. So again, reducing inflammation, keeping a good, healthy gut helps reduce a lot of that. Keep yourself open-minded. One of the other things that I didn't mention, which is really important, and we noticed this about centurions, is socialization. So if you take the blue zone, and these are countries that are within an area around the world, and most of them are islands. One is Okinawa, Japan, the southern part of Japan. There's Ikaria, or Ikaria, which is in the Mediterranean. It's one of the islands of Greece, which is the further east, just 30 miles west of the Turkish border. Sardinia, Italy, Loma Linda, California. And it's the way these people eat and their lifestyle that these people naturally live to be 100 years old. One of the other areas that I want to mention is the Hunza province of northeast Pakistan, where if you die at the age of 92, it's like dying at 62 here in the United States. I mean, everybody lives to be over 100 years old. Of course, these people live up in the mountains. They're not surrounded by any industries. Their soils have not been intoxicated with the chemicals and the byproducts that come out of these factories. These people eat everything natural, all organic. They're physically active. They live up in the mountains. So when you go to the American Academy of Anti-Aging conferences, we talk a lot about these cultures and these civilizations and what they eat and what they do, and then we transfer that and saying, well, this is what we have to do. So yes, in America, I do take supplements. I take a lot of supplements because even our foods, even though you're eating healthy, our foods just don't have all the nutrients that you might see in some of these other areas the way they grow them. The best time to eat any kind of vegetable or fruit is a day or two before it's ripe or after it ripens while it's on the tree. Picking the fruits off the tree 2 weeks before they're actually ripe doesn't allow for all the nutrients to get into that fruit or vegetable in its appropriate time. So that's why supplements are important. Taking a lot of the antioxidants, your vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E. These are very powerful antioxidants to take as supplements on the side. And I just hope that you enjoyed this episode. And thanks again for joining us. If you have any other questions, please send them in through the webpage. Some of these questions that you may have may be answered just by listening to our podcast. So tune in, give us a good review. And with that, I'm Dr. Sal. Have a great day, and God bless.